Well, I've been playing with it. It's Saturday. I just checked. The motors are supposed to come today. I can proceed after I get the motors. I'll mount the motors and then I'll start soldering up the ESC. But this stuff is just placed on here to play with it. This is the little TBS Triumph video transmitter. It'll go right in there. I have mounted the Immortal T through the mounting holes in the back. It's just running up through the front, and the SMA connector has been mounted right there. The little TBS Triumph antenna I got was a CFUL connector, whatever kind. It was not the right one for the SMA, so I've got another one on order. It'll be here. Like I say, the TBS Triumph Unify Pro is going to go there. The little Crossfire Nano Pro is going to go on top of it. The XT90, like I told you it was going to have, going to go through there. The capacitor is going to be on top right there. Don't quite have my spacing right on this yet. I don't really have enough threads. I have a grommet, two little nuts like that for spacers. Couldn't find exactly what I needed. Don't think two's quite what I need there. I think it's going to be one in a washer. That'll bring this flight controller down a little bit towards the ESC. The problem is this connector right here touches the ESC when it comes down much further. This is just the wires for connecting the ESC to the flight controller that'll come around and plug in right around the corner, right there. Change the angle on the compass so it'll be more straight up when the quad's flying tilted forward. The last thing is the camera. Let me show you the problem I've got with the camera. And this is where the camera is supposed to be mounted. And this is the camera. Whoops. And as you can see, if I hold it on one side, I've got 1/4 of an inch to make up. Right and left in there. And the little holder that comes with the camera is too big. So I'm going to have to figure out something on this camera. This is the holder, mount, whatever that comes with the camera. No, unless I put it in sideways like that and can rotate the camera 90 degrees, it doesn't fit. I don't think you can rotate that camera that way because it's just too wide. As you can see, these little arms won't go between it, much less this part. So I can't really get my camera mounted the way I want to. Just barely too big. Yikes. Don't want to break it, but you see if I force that in there, how far apart it's got the stuff pulled, and then these two tabs won't go down in the frame anymore. It's just really got it pulled out there. It's essentially the same size. This really needs to be smaller, or this needs to be just a touch bigger. So I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do to fix that. Other than that, everything's been going pretty well with this. I remembered now why I like building airplanes instead. This is just screw a bunch of stuff together, solder it together, and you're done. There's nothing here that is any kind of creative at all. There's no carving of foam, no figuring out special parts. It's pretty much just one step in front of the other. I was looking around in some old flight controllers for some more spacers and stuff, and found these nylon spacers. So a little washer that thick, that spacer is all I need to get the good spacing on my flight controller and ESC in the frame. Also, while I was looking around for those spacers, this is a piece of an old flight controller I had destroyed. Remember, I destroyed several of them. And right here is me a piece of foam to take off of here and put underneath that flight controller on the barometer. So this foam, see, and that's why it's on this one, I think will be perfect for that. And what I'm talking about there is that little chip right there. I don't know if you can see it. Black one has a hole in it. That's because it's a barometer. So right there, I'm going to put in that foam. I have to get it off of here first in a condition that makes it usable. So that solves that barometer problem. So I pulled that foam off the old board, and it still had some adhesive on it. So that's going to keep it on that flight controller enough to keep it in place when it goes between the ESC and this flight controller. So there's my barometer problem completely solved. Boy, that's great. Well, I took the grommets off and the connector off the front of the ESC. I'm getting ready to solder up these power connectors right here with that XT90 pigtail. I don't want to melt. These are too close to solder up the ESCs. With the grommet in there, it'll melt it, in my fear. There we are, ready to solder. We've got some blue painter's tape just put over the top of the ESC. Solder pops, little solder balls go everywhere. They're so small, you usually don't see them. I don't want one of them to get back on the top of that, so I'm trying to protect it. I'm going to tin this up using my little iron on the solder station, get everything ready to go, and then when everything's tinned up and ready to go, I'm going to use Big Bertha because she's got enough heat in her that once this is all tinned and ready, whoops, knocked my glasses off. All I'm going to have to do is put the wire on top like that and then go straight down with Big Bertha for just a second and it'll be done. That's 120 watt soldering iron. Well, that pad on the right just didn't want to take any solder. Well, it wasn't hot enough yet, really. So I got some paste solder flux and just, you can see, covered it with solder flux paste. That should help us get going here. Yep, go ahead. Tell me that's not pretty. Nice and shiny, plenty of solder. You can see all the extra flux I used. That's what that brown stuff is right there. There we go. And there you go. There it is. Back on the frame. Got the TPU back here on the standoffs again. Had to put that through there before I sorted it on, because there's no way you'll ever get that through there otherwise. So now it's on there without the grommets in it. The motors come today. I'll put them on and then solder my 12 wires on. Then I'm going to have to back out these screws, so these screws come down where I can get that flight controller back off those screws enough to put the grommets back on them. These right here is what I'm talking about. Gummies. But I'll melt them. They're just too close. That's just too close right there. I just don't trust it. But now I'm waiting on the motors. And I just checked. They do show out for delivery. So the motors will be here sometime between now and 10 o'clock tonight, it says. That's a 12-hour period. So now I've got the edges to pre-tin on the ESC. I've just got it protected from solder splatter, and I'm just going to pre-tin these, and then I'll turn it around, pre-tin the other side, and then we'll be doing nothing but waiting on motors, trying to do everything I can before they arrive. There you go, all pre-tinned, ready to have the ESC wires cut and just touch to them for a permanent connection. So we'll let that sit. Guess I can start working on the cable between the flight controller and the ESC for control. Little stuff while I'm waiting on parts. Alright guys, I'm going to take a portion of this picture and save it as save that away. I'm going to come over to where the 743 Slim is, and right here where this connector is, I'm going to run in and get me a picture of that connector. I'm going to save that away, and then I'm going to go drop those two into Microsoft Word. You'll have to forgive me. I didn't show you how I did this, but I just dropped those two graphics into Word, and now I've drawn lines between them, how I want my wires to go. I guess I should label these. Oh well, I'll label them later. This is the flight controller side. This is the ESC side over here. So we'll start at the top on the flight controller side. Servo 4 goes to ESC 4. These are just straight number for number. 3 goes to 3, 2 goes to 2, 1 goes to 1. Receive on UART 8 is going to listen to this telly right here for telemetry. Current goes to current. Don't know if I'm going to have to use that or not, but I'm going to connect it. Might be able to get current through here. I haven't been able to find that information out. I've heard rattlings of all sorts of different things on this things, which I'll discuss. Ground goes to ground. I'm just going to use the first one down here. And VBAT to BAT plus. Now, some of the ramblings I've heard is that this is mislabeled. Don't know if it's on the silk screen on the item. Don't know if it's on the documentation which comes with the ESC. Don't know.
This that's labeled BAT plus may be actually 10 volts. What's labeled 10 volts may be actually BAT plus. Either one of those will run this flight controller, so don't really have to worry about it much. Because if I can bring that back up, oops, nope. The H743 Slim has an input voltage of a little slow computer here today, 6 to 36 volts. So that 10 volts will be fine. If it was 5 volts coming out of that, which I've seen some of the others, and I will have to check the back of the box on this ESC real quick. 5 volts might not hack it. I would need the BAT plus, the full 6S, 21, 22 volts. If that is truly 10 volts coming out, then I will be fine with either. For this flight controller, I'd rather have VBAT, or what this calls BAT plus, and that's the way I am going to wire it. I may just put a meter on it real quick here in a second and measure that. I plugged in the battery and measured it. This silk screen is correct. This one was 23 volts. This one was 10. Now there could be a method of madness to using the 10 volts. Here's why. This VBAT could just be a straight pass through of the battery voltage. That's what it says by its label. Going here. Whereas this 10 volts could be going through a voltage regulator inside the ESC that has some filtering and just makes the signal better. The 10 volts smoother going into the flight controller. So I'm going to have to look at the box for what this is real quick. Well, the box that came in says that this 10 volts, 2 amps, is what it can draw. And I think, I'll look at everything closely, but I think the camera, the RC receiver, the GPS, and the VTX, I don't think they all are going to go above 2 amps. So I'm kind of torn right now, thinking that this would be straight through battery voltage, complete with sags and all sorts of junk that happens because of the ESCs drawing current and causing fluctuations in that. Whereas this right here may be filtered from that, and it is a good enough voltage. Right now I'm going to hook up all the wires except for this one and continue to think about this. I need to publish this video so I can get input from some of you guys. One of my little touches, I like to do this. I do it on most of my capacitors. Well, on my quads or where there's a carbon fiber frame for it to short on. The can on a capacitor is usually ground, but it is metal. So I just put a little 1-inch piece of shrink tubing on it and shrunk it around that capacitor so it doesn't, the metal in the can doesn't touch anything. And that'll be the end of that one. And I think I've figured out what I'm going to do to solve my problem with, do I use VBAT or the 10 volts out of the ESC for the flight controller and the camera and everything. So it's got to power more than just the flight controller. It's got to do the flight controller, the GPS, the VTX, the RX, and the camera. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up that way on the 10 volts. And then I'm going to use my bench power supply and power it. And then I can just take my bench power supply down and down and down and down and see where it browns out at, or what quits working where, by just dropping the voltage on my bench power supply. I can set up on the USB cable in the back, I can set up a program that will set it at 25 volts and drop it a half a volt every 10 seconds. And it'll just sit there and do that until I see something I don't like. Don't know how I'll do that. Just thinking out loud right now, but I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hook it to the 10 volts, and then I'm going to use the bench power supply to see if it browns out. Then I'll make my decision. Yeah, that's the ticket. Use my bench power supply, because without the motors turned on at all, bench power supply will tell me how much current's being drawn. I'll just be able to read it. And it'll be the whole shooting match, camera, the whole 9 yards, except for the motors, as long as the motors aren't spinning. And if that's underneath 2 amps, then I don't have to switch that wire over to the VBAT. I can leave it at 10 volts. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the bench power supply to troubleshoot this for myself. Thank you, guys. Still, we'll take your input anytime. Please, always take your input at any moment. Thank you.